Magic in A Song of Ice and Fire is weird and limited. By the time the series begins in the first book, A Game of Thrones, magic has seemingly died from the world. While the show and books are famous for having dragons, the last dragon died about 150 years before the start of the present story. Throughout that first book and season, we get some glimpses at magical potential that lies within this world, be it these rituals that are undergone to revive Daenerys' husband, called Drogo, and then that final glorious Daenerys chapter where she walks into the pyre from which the first three dragons in that century and a half are reborn to the world. But in that first book, those are really the only glimpses we get at magic writ large. The second book gets a bit weirder. We're introduced to the Faceless Men a little bit via Jack and Hagar, and the much more prominent instance of magic in A Clash of Kings, the second novel, comes from Melisandre of Asshai and her shadow babies. Today, I want to discuss this specific form of magic known as shadowbinding and the implications it might have for the future of Ice and Fire. As mentioned, this first comes up in A Clash of Kings, and Melisandre is a very inherently magical character. She's a red priestess, devoted to the Lord of Light, R'hllor, this red god who provides those who follow him with these magical abilities. We know that Beric Dondarrion keeps being brought back from the dead by the red priest Thoros of Myr, who barely even believes in this stuff. But, for what it's worth, it seems as though Melisandre's powers are at least somewhat divorced from the Lord of Light. We have one viewpoint chapter from her perspective in A Dance with Dragons, and we get kind of a glimpse at the man behind the curtain here. Some of her magic comes from these kind of powders and alchemical substances, if I could speak, that she casts into her flames to change their color or grow it in strength. And additionally, we know she is from Asshai, and she is also called a shadowbinder. This is a very specific kind of magic that seems to be unique from the Lord of Light, but she does kind of give it a Lord of Light spin, saying that shadows are servants in the light being cast because of it. Shadowbinding seems to be some form of blood magic, as Melisandre needs Kingsblood to work her powers, and we see her use Stannis Baratheon for that purpose. Though, for shadowbinding purposes, she does not use his blood necessarily. I'm not going to think any more about that, but beyond that, the instance of Stannis killing Renly via his shadow, and Melisandre birthing this monstrous assassin, is obviously the most famous instance of this type of magic being used in Ice and Fire. But in the books, it's split into two separate assassinations. We have the first one with Renly, which comes out of absolutely nowhere. We don't have Davos's perspective seeing Melisandre birth this shadow to kill Renly specifically. We just don't know what happens. Catelyn sees a shadow with the face of Stannis Baratheon kill his brother and then vanish. But a few chapters later, Stannis is still in trouble and needs to birth another shadow. It's this second assassination that gives us insight into what this process actually entails. It is here where we have Davos's perspective. Rather than having him kind of spoil this surprise for Renly, we instead see him smuggle Melisandre into Storm's End to kill the individual who was holding it for the now deceased Renly, that being a guy named Courtnay Penrose. We see him pass under Storm's End, as apparently there is magic within the walls that prevents these shadows from passing within, which could be interesting and could tie into what is preventing the others from passing through the wall. But regardless, it's this instance where we see Melisandre birth this shadow through Davos's eyes. The show decided to combine these two instances, cutting Courtnay Penrose despite him being the most fleshed out character in fiction, and ultimately deciding to have Davos bear perspective on Melisandre's shadow birth to kill Renly. But it's fascinating, because this type of magic seemingly vanishes from the story after A Clash of Kings. We see these two massive shadow assassinations that result in a truly groundbreaking shakeup of politics in Westeros, seeing Renly's support then go to Stannis, and Stannis becoming the legitimate favorite for taking the throne before losing the Battle of the Blackwater. It's a massive political upheaval that is caused by this really unique and really direct form of magic that we just never really see again. And that's always kind of weirded me out. magic in Ice and Fire generally demands some sort of toll and is at least a little bit fleshed out. It's not science, you don't know how it works, but you have some ideas as to what its capabilities are, what it takes to work this kind of magic. But as far as all of this goes, shadowbinding seems pretty low effort, low cost, and has a massive payout of being able to kill whoever. That is not to say it is without cost. Stannis Baratheon seems visibly aged by this experience, and we know that Melisandre tells him that he is not capable of doing this again after these two instances of shadow assassinations. We also know that Stannis is at least a little traumatized by it, given the fact that when this is happening, when the shadows are going out and killing people, Stannis is asleep and unable to be woken up. It seems as though his consciousness is kind of there controlling this shadow, which is part of why I kind of like this magic, given the fact that it is making Stannis do this Cain enabling on his own. By the way, I just finished East of Eden, which is one of my favorite books of all time now, but that's beside the point. There is at least some physical cost here. It drains the life from you. It seems to wear on your essence as an individual, not dissimilarly to coming back from the dead as this kind of fire white form, as is the case with Beric Dondarrion and then later Lady Stoneheart, though obviously I think to a lesser degree with Stannis. I want to pause myself briefly to ask your opinion on magic in Ice and Fire generally. Do you have a favorite kind? Do you have a type that you'd like me to dive into more? Let me know in the comments down below, and while you're down there, leave a like, subscribe. As mentioned, Shadowbinders kind of vanish from the story after Clash of Kings. Melisandre is still around, obviously, but we never see her use this power again in the 3 books that follow those 2 assassinations. She has a viewpoint now, and it could be interesting to see her kind of facilitate this type of magic through some sort of means in the Winds of Winter, through a kind of first-person perspective. That would be really neat. And there is only one other mention of shadowbinding as a practice in the main series, and it comes from a rather unexpected source. Specifically, in A Dance with Dragons, Quentyn Martell is traveling throughout Essos on this long journey towards Daenerys. During that time, he comes to Volantis, this massive city ruled by a council of 3 triarchs. While he is spending time there, he finds that this place called the Merchant's House, which is one of the main trade guilds of this city, has dealt with Shadowbinders of Asshai and even hosted them fairly recently, which I find quite a bit interesting. Well, I know some readers are bored by Associ politics, especially after Dany's arc in A Dance with Dragons. I find them fascinating, especially in Volantis. This city, as previously mentioned, revolves around these elected triarchs, and there are 2 political parties who are relevant to the struggles of the main series. The first is the Tigers. They are kind of militaristic, warlike. They want to expand Volantis by conquest and grow by any means necessary. In contrast, elephants favor diplomacy and trade. Over the past 300 years, elephants have been in the majority on this council, filling 2 or 3 seats for that entire period. But we hear through Quentyn and Tyrion that an election is ongoing, and it seems as though the Tigers are favored to take at least 2 of these 3 spots. As we do know, despite not being in Volantis after Tyrion leaves about halfway through Dance with Dragons, that the Volantene fleet is launched against Daenerys and is likely going to end up swooping in after the Battle of Fire to figure out what is going on there and likely attack Daenerys. This city is on the brink of war and very much wants to attack the Dragon Queen. With that said, the elephant connection to trade is kind of interesting to me, given the fact that the Merchant's House is known to deal with shadowbinders. Given that fact, I could see this magic used to assassinate some political figure in Volantis, potentially seeing the fleet launched in war against Dany, and then by the time Dany comes west and gets to the city, a new group of leaders is in power and might be more favorable to her and her cause generally, given the use of this magic, though it is unclear what exactly this magic requires, and that could very much complicate things for the Volantines. Specifically, it's unclear whether this specific form of shadowbinding requires Kingsblood by any means. Melisandre is very focused on it, and Melisandre is the only character we've seen do this specific brand of shadow assassination, but it's unclear if the person in question needs to be a king. I tend to think Martin's philosophy on kings and rulership falls more in line with Varys's riddle about power residing where men believe it resides than in kind of Targaryen blood purity stuff that I'm not quite a huge fan of. But regardless, I think that the idea of being king is the crucial point here. Mance is discussed as having Kingsblood despite not being a Targaryen. He's not a Targaryen despite certain theories. And Stannis does have a drop of the dragon, but he's really pretty distant from that line and does seem to be at least good enough to do some of these shadow babies. So it's unclear whether any type of Kingsblood would be required. It could be done by maybe one of the other elephants. That's kind of a Triarch is kind of a king, right? That's close enough. That, of course, brings us to Jon Snow and Melisandre. We've seen what she can do with Stannis Baratheon. What exactly is she going to do if she ends up making a shadow baby with someone who is half Targaryen? Is she going to make a shadow dragon? I don't know. That's a thing in D&D. I don't know if it's a thing in A Song of Ice and Fire. This is a point of interest, though. Melisandre and her visions and her magic are a constant point of temptation for Jon throughout A Dance with Dragons. These two characters' stories are very much intertwined, and they will likely stay as such throughout the Winds of Winter, as Melisandre is going to be our main view on the wall in the aftermath of the mutiny and with Jon dead. I think it'd be fascinating to see Jon potentially even use some of Melisandre's power to advance whatever political ends he ends up supporting, specifically likely against the undead. I don't know how well a shadow assassin would fare against the Great Other, or just against White Walkers in general, but I don't know. It could be worth a shot. I think Jon maybe would try it, but also might not. I don't know if he'd go for Melisandre's magic in that regard, despite going along with the Mance plot and believing in her visions. Magic in A Song of Ice and Fire is described as a sword without a hilt. There is no safe way to grasp it. I think that in order to really flesh out this form of magic, these shadow assassins, we really need to see the cost that it extracts on someone in a more direct way, because Stannis not being a viewpoint character and only being observed from outside perspective does kind of limit what we know of this magic doing to him, and additionally its effects seem to kind of fade in A Storm of Swords and A Dance with Dragons. If I want more of this magic in the future of the series, I want to see what exactly it does to the people who cast this shadow, because I think as it stands, it's kind of weird that it is this absent from the world writ large. We have the world of Ice and Fire, we have Fire and Blood, but in neither of them do we have any mentions of shadow assassins. And that seems pretty weird to me, albeit I'm sure people wouldn't believe shadow assassins, but I'm sure there'd be at least some folklore about it. Thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. I really appreciate it, and it really helps grow the channel, and it is free. But if you want to do something that's not free, I also have a Patreon. It is linked in the description. I'll have many more videos for you on A Song of Ice and Fire, House of the Dragon, Game of Thrones, Dunk and Egg in the very near future, and I look forward to sharing all of that with you. By this point, I've probably started or I'm about to start my third year of law school, so wish me luck. We will see. Last year. Woo!